Here we go. So I'm here with Jured from HIPIA, the
Hi
International
there.
Association of Hyperpolyglots. And it's the first time I do something like this. So it's going to be a little bit weird, I guess. But here we go. So tell us about yourself a little bit.
Okay, so my hyperpolyglot journey. So hello, my name is Jared. I've lived in five different countries and in five different U.S. states. Right now, however, I live in Brooklyn, New York, in the region of Crown Heights, which is noteworthy for having an Afro-Caribbean population as well as a Hasidic Jewish population known as the Chabad Lubavitch, probably most famous for among many other things, the tunnel incident that happened of January of this year. Another thing to mention is that my polyglot journey begins when
Should
I was.
I know what the tunnel incident is? Or
Don't worry about
okay,
it. It was
okay.
okay, fine, very well. I know that there are some people who know, but in any case, it involved part of a synagogue being illegally expanded by people who wanted it to be bigger. I could go very much into detail concerning the inner politickings of the Hasidic courts, but for that, I think that's an entirely new lecture
Yeah,
series.
yeah.
But the good news is that one fantastic thing about learning new languages, as you probably know, Mikael, is that you can actually open up different areas of the human experience and also of human knowledge. And you even see this with AI. Like, I'm not certain if you've tried this with ChatGPT. If you ask about a certain musician or a certain literary work in different languages, you get varying amounts of how much the AI knows. And so, for example, certain shows that were popular, for example, on DR, which is Denmark's state-owned broadcaster, when I ask about them in English, they don't know anything. And when I ask them in Danish, then they spill out all of the details. So that's also one thing to keep in mind.
I've
And
never tried that actually.
yeah, very well. It's very, very fun. Yeah. Another thing is, so my polyglot journey begins when I was 4 years old, when my parents handed me a board book of the world, and I was so amazed by all of the different pages in it that I dreamt of exploring a lot of those places. And also, I remember even on Sesame Street in the United States, you had bits of Spanish and French and other things in there. And I was very much amazed, like uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis, yeah, all of that. And I was amazed. And my father also had a dream of studying French to be able to work in French West Africa, not also to mention various Hebrew songs, not only from the prayers, but also from Shirim Haktanim, which is a little kids tape. And I was so amazed by learning all of the Hebrew letters. And of course, the new vowel system, which for those of you who have studied Semitic languages like Arabic or Hebrew before, you've noticed that you have to learn how to read things without vowels, unlike, for example, in languages written with the Latin alphabet, in which A, E, I indicate what vowel sounds you say. However, in the United States, there are significant problems in which a lot of people believe, oh, if you're not young, then you won't be able to learn a language. This I've noted in a lot, I don't know about Latin America, but a good deal of Europe and Asia and in Africa, in places where I and my family have traveled, this is not believed as much. And here in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, I've encountered some people from places such as Burkina Faso, the Ivory Coast, who have learned upwards of 10 languages. And another thing that they realize that I think a lot of monolingual Americans don't is that you don't necessarily need to be perfect in all of them. And I think that that's something that's taken as a given in many multilingual societies like India, Nigeria, and South Africa that are somewhat like goes over the head of people in rural America. New York is very different, however. So it's like a bit of a UN. We do have the literal UN here, but it's also
Hmm.
like a subway stop where if you want to go to Punjab, you head off to Jackson Heights. Want to head to Tibet, also Jackson Heights. And if you want to go to various other areas like Russia or Ukraine, then you head to Brighton Beach. So it's like a have your pick of anywhere in the world.
So I've got a bunch of questions by people. I mean, I've got questions of my own as well, but um, the first one I think everyone's waiting for is how do you learn languages?
Ooh, very good question. So, a lot of people I encounter at parties, they want a one size fits all answer. And the closest thing I can give to that is listen to 30 minutes of your language every single day. So, right now, I've been learning some Slovenian in part because I really like Slovenian love songs, in particular because, mi dva, the two of us, unlike any of the other Slavic languages, they have a pronoun that for two people. And this really makes songs hit on an entirely new level. But what I do is I try to listen to 30 minutes either of various TV shows. They also have the Smurfs available for free on YouTube. I think it's called Smrkci in Slovenian, if I recall correctly. This is a one size fits all solution that can suit almost anyone, but especially if you're an absolute beginner, you are going to need to supplement that with flashcards. And in particular, depends on where you are. Imagine learning a language like a very, very big jigsaw puzzle, in which you have to put the pieces together. And when you open up the puzzle, what you encounter are the edges first, that you assemble the edges and then the middle. So the edges in this case are like the how are you, the verbs to be, to have. And then you can also start with I speak a little of the language. And that's one thing. Now, I would recommend while waiting in line, you can probably get something like Anki or Memrise and then learn various flashcards. Another thing I want people to keep in mind,
How do
to keep in mind,
you, just let me interrupt 1 second.
they do.
When using flashcards, you use, like, you learn complete sentences or just words?
Depends on the time. I would not recommend, especially for the beginners, to learn singular words. That does not help very often. It helps for the advanced stage in which you've been fire hosing your brain consistently in a lot of things. And so if you encounter, for example, an English word magnanimous, I don't even know what that means, you would probably recognize it from somewhere. Use only single words flashcards for advanced languages. For everything else, you want to use closed deletions. So, to be or not to be, that is the blank. And so you fill in. This serves to program your brain almost like learning theater lines. So it's like you forget something, and then when you see this flashcard, it tells your brain the next time you forget this, add in this missing piece. And
Yeah.
so what I would usually do, for example, is supply for example the Slovenian like shevedno, meaning Yiddish you would say noch als, which means like still, or as in I'm still here. And I would add a sentence in which I know everything in that except for the phrase shevedno, and then I'm tested on that so that that is the answer to the flashcard, so that the next time in which I know need to say the word still and I can't think of it, then my brain turns on a switch. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 It's slightly different from what I do. I mostly translate or use questions and answers. So question in the language, and then you have to answer the question in the same language,
Hmm.
or directly direct translations into the
Yes.
language. But yeah, fill in the gaps. It's a good
Well,
idea as well.
also, I would say that was very, very helpful when I was in school. Like I come from a Jewish background in which like you have the Siddur, the prayer book, you have it in Hebrew and you also have it in English or in other regions of the world, various other languages. And so you see the side by side translations and you can compare them. And
You speak both Yiddish and Hebrew?
that is correct. They are different languages, although very much like Latin, as a result of the Catholic Church, has had influence on various other languages wherever Catholicism has spread. Hebrew has had influence on Yiddish in the same way. For those of you who have studied, for example, Persian, for example, you have words from Arabic as a result of Islam that also entered Arabic, like Persian discourse. I think same is true for many Turkic languages as well. And so I would say Yiddish is to Hebrew like what English is to Latin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've
Hmm.
heard. I don't speak either of them. I've heard
Yeah.
Yiddish is heavily influenced by German.
That is very true. The core of it is German. You call it, it used to be called Yiddish Teich, and that was 1,000 years ago, and it still
Okay.
survives in some expressions like verteichen, meaning to translate into German, or in some cases you hear verteicht und verbessert von, meaning translated and improved by. Like
So a modern German speaker could listen to it and not understand it, but
That, well, depends on what source, what kind of words you use. So the thing is that Yiddish does have significant portions of Hebrew and Aramaic vocabulary and Slavic vocabulary, but it can also adjust its vocabulary to sound more Deutschmarisch, as we call it, which means sounding more German. And so various words like wahnsinnig or
hmm.
vielleicht would not happen in Yiddish. Instead, you would opt for Hebrew words like mishuggah or the other word vielleicht efsha, both of which come from Hebrew. And the thing is that depending on what words I choose to use, I can make it understandable to a German speaker or otherwise completely
Okay.
unintelligible. So one example, as a German speaker, you would probably not be able to understand like die Verwerkes und die Estáskes seinen Chaverem, which means so Veverkes, this comes from Slavic, that's like Viviurka in Polish, I think means a squirrel, and Jasteczka is a lizard. So, and Chaverim is a friend. So Slavic, Hebrew. So the Veverkas and the Jasteczkas and the Chaverim. So the squirrels and the lizards are friends. Completely
Okay.
unintelligible to a German speaker, but
So it's got a lot of Polish vocab then as well, or
yeah,
Eastern
yeah, it does.
or
Yeah,
Slavic.
mostly. Yes, that's correct. Yes, and you also do have this reflected in some of the prepositions as well. And so, až do, we have this in Czech and Slovak, all the way to. And so you have that in Yiddish, like až biz treren, like all the way to tears. And so, chob gelacht až biz treren. I was laughing so hard that I started crying.
Okay. So which family does it belong to then?
Oh, Yiddish is West Germanic, which means that
Okay.
it's the same family as English, German, Afrikaans, and Dutch,
Okay.
and Frisian languages.
And I suppose learning German was very easy for you then?
Yes and no. So the issue with similar languages, and because I work a lot with Nordic languages, this is a thing. There are some people when they hear, like knowing the various Scandinavian trifecta of Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian, some say, oh, they're quite similar. But on the other hand, you do need to know the differences as well. I have encountered like some people, native Indonesian speakers, who say, I can't speak Malay because it's so close, because it's almost like an American trying to speak with a British accent. A lot of
Okay.
Americans will recognize that a British would pronounce the word evolution as evolution, even though I think in some areas of Britain it may be different. But I can guarantee you, you almost never hear an American pronounce it as evolution. The same way that with very close languages, you have to have very strict dividers in your brain. And one thing that I think helps with the dividers is if you collect experiences with the languages. And the thing is that because the various shows that I've watched across the Scandinavian family have been quite different from each other, and that I've had different experiences with each, it's not like I'm mixing up the Swedish word droring, meaning darling, with the Norwegian word droring, which means a weirdo. Same word, same spelling.
Oh
So
wow.
Yiddish and German also differ in regards to their Germanic vocabulary. So as a German speaker, wie sagt man to promise auf Deutsch?
Bitte?
Wie sagt man to promise?
Ich keine Ahnung ist.
Versprechen. Yeah, versprechen.
Okay, yeah.
Versprechen. Yeah, now in Yiddish, that's zusagen. So I don't know if
Zusagen.
you'd say zusagen. I have heard from some people, maybe there are some comments that would say that it's like a dialectical thing. But yet again, how you say "I love you" in Yiddish is "Ich hab dich lieb," which I believe is more commonly found in Bavarian and Austrian dialects. So even because Yiddish Teich was mostly based in Bavaria, Austria, I believe also the region of Switzerland, that that became the core as opposed to Hochdeutsch, which became Hanover, in which that was its primary core. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Indeed. And I could go for hours and hours concerning exactly the differences between the Scandinavian languages, including how they changed their orthography to be different. You do not see a double K in Swedish. You only see CK, like tak. Yeah.
Um, how come you speak all three of them?
Oh,
Do you
very good
live in
question.
all three countries?
I've actually only lived in Sweden, but I have also been a researcher in Greenland as well. I did have a plan to visit Norway that ultimately never materialized. Above all, I a quarter Swedish on my mom's side. And when my dad, not my dad died, heaven forfend, when my grandfather died in 2015, I no, it was my grandmother that died. Sorry, my grandmother died in 2012. I acquired a lot of letters written by my now deceased Swedish letter relatives that I wanted to be able to read. And they're somewhere in my parents' house. They live in Connecticut. I live in New York City. So I visit them frequently, especially because I have a 3-month-old baby nephew who I sometimes speak and sing in various languages. Yeah, his favorite song is I think is it it's a Czech song. Máš mauvičko dávno spát. I forget the name of it, but I like singing that to him. The Crazy Man's Lullaby.
That was, and I think I'm getting the answer to that. That was another question, but
Yes.
how do you maintain the languages? That was another question.
Ooh, excellent question. So, the short answer is ideally over the course of a week, I want to water them like plants. Over the course of a month, I want to water them like plants. Now, granted, with some languages like Spanish and German, which I don't really actively rehearse, I hear a lot of German on the street. I live in New York City, and definitely you can imagine we have a lot of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans here,
Mm.
especially. I believe the Dominicans themselves are the biggest diaspora group in all of the United States. And of course, I did take bachata classes significantly in order to prepare well, I also like dancing as well until my martial arts trainer came back and then he started Hasidic Fight Club. So,
What do you do for martial arts?
oh, very good. So it's pretty much pick what you want. He does MMA, and I like doing Muay Thai as well. But in
Mm.
particular, it's I'm a bit biased because my kicks have been very, very strong ever since I was 9 years old and getting into fights at the schoolyard. Not exactly the most how would you say the blioren in English, blioren, like blooming years. Not exactly the heyday of my life. Yes. So,
So
but
I don't think we've spoken about this. I mean, on camera. What do you do exactly for a living?
Ooh, very good question. So you can actually see I brought my shirt. So these are actually characters that I drew myself. I make video games. So I've been working on my fourth, but I also make games, Mikkel, that are inspired by my travels. So they're RPGs that are set in various places that I've either been or have friends that have consulted me and like bring their country to life. And so far I have a dream about a dream. I have many dreams, but I also have games, which I meant to say. I have a game about covering Nuke Adventures, which is set in Nuke, Greenland, hence the Danish thing. I can also say like so like I can speak a little bit of Greenlandic. On top of that, yeah, my second game was set in Uvira, which is a township in the DR Congo where I had some WhatsApp buddies. Um, and then the one I'm working on right now is set in Viti Levu, which is the big island of Fiji. And some of these books behind me, I actually got at the University of the South Pacific Bookstore, which is located in Suva. And yeah, lots of interesting things about that university because there are some other Pacific Island countries that are so small, like Tuvalu, that they can't even have physically a university there. So Tuvalu's lawyers get educated in Fiji. So if you go in the bookstores there, you can see handbooks about Tuvaluan law.
What do they
So,
speak there?
they spell Fijian Navusavakafiti is the Fijian language. In Fiji, they speak that. English is commonly spoken in a good deal of the Pacific Island countries that were former British colonies, which is most of them. On top of that, they also have their own languages as well that are used alongside English, especially on the street. So you have a situation in Fiji, even in the rural areas, where most of the signage is in English, and the people on the street in the rural areas are speaking Fijian. On top of the case of Fiji, you also have the Indo-Fijians, which speak Fiji Hindi, which is sort of like Bhojpuri, now available in Google Translate after the humongous update that took place in June 2023, and with various influence from Hindi, other Indian languages, and of course Fijian and English, on top of the same Hindi that would be spoken in Delhi.
Wait,
Um, and then Tuvalu,
how?
like big Tuvaluan as well.
I'm trying to
Take your time. I
remember
know
the
it's a
like.
lot.
How
I
far away
quoted a
is Fiji?
professor
I
Modi.
thought it was like in the Pacific Island wave.
It is, yeah. These are
How
all
come there
Pacific.
are some Hindi speakers there?
Oh, become very good question. So the British, back in the time when slavery was going out of favor, decided to supplant their plantation economy with indentured servants from India
Okay.
instead. So what happened in some places like Guyana and Trinidad and Fiji was that they took various indentured servants from India and then they brought them to these places.
Okay.
After they became independent, they remained there, and that's why you have in Trinidadian cuisine like the alo pie, and the alo I think is a Hindi Bengali word referring to potatoes, and it's very similar to the vegetable samosa, just a little bit more like a Cornish pasty, as it were. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I traveled a lot, but well,
Um,
y- so you make video games,
that's correct.
but what's your background?
Ooh, very good. So my background, are we talking my background in coding languages, or are we talking my
Okay,
real?
so you're a programmer.
Yeah, I do
Oh,
programming, but I also do the drawing myself. These characters are actually from a free game that you can get online on itch.io called Iskola, which is a Hungarian word meaning school. And it was inspired by the Super Munchers game, in which you like have a character that you like there's a grid with a whole bunch of words or numbers on it, and then there's a title at the top, like US presidents or prime numbers, and your goal is to be able to eat the things that are in the category while avoiding them that are not. And you also have monsters running around trying to eat you. And so this game I made very inspired by that, but I wanted people to add their own content precisely so that people could learn languages with it. So, yeah, if you want to learn, for example, Slovenian pronouns, as I've been doing, yeah, Ishkola's your guy. So concerning what I do for it, I do the programming, I do the drawing, I do the creative aspect, and since 2023, I've also been doing the music and the sound design.
okay. No, my question was more in the direction of if uh, because you travel so much for work, or you've lived in a bunch of different places, or you don't travel for work, my impression is that you're all over the place. What exactly do you do there?
All over the New York subway system, yes. But the thing is that
Okay.
the difference between a video game maker and other people is that the video game maker sits down and makes video games. So the issue is, yes, I enjoy traveling. I enjoy traveling in particular with a very keen eye and looking into very small details, especially. And the fun thing, you definitely have experienced this with being a polyglot, is that you get to do stuff like read the graffiti or the ads that are otherwise completely invisible if you only
Yeah,
speak English.
yeah.
And the thing is, I don't travel very, very often. In April of 2023, I was in the Scottish Highlands and in Edinburgh. I did learn some Scottish Gaelic for that. I did mostly see it in the supermarkets in the Isle of Skye.
Did people speak it?
I did actually hear it spoken by kids on the street, but the
Okay.
thing is that it's in very, very rural areas. It's not like, for example, you have crowded subway system in which everyone is speaking Scottish Gaelic, just simply because it's more of a rural thing.
Hmm.
So, but concerning that whole issue, like I don't think I've spent long enough in order to truly understand a lot of the dynamics here. While on the topic of endangered languages, I do live in Brooklyn, and which is the world capital for the Yiddish language, as we've increasingly discussed. And I think the dynamic there is somewhat that if you establish this connection with someone, then you find out that they speak Yiddish, then you can switch accordingly. And then sometimes you have clues based on signage or what books are available in the store or just
Does does that happen naturally though, or you have to
it
kind of
does. I
force
find that,
yourself
yeah.
to?
And this also is true even with non-endangered languages on the street. You see this, for example, in the Spanish-speaking zones as well, in which you have some people hopping between Spanish and English, and I've seen this in the Russian-speaking areas as well, in which usually you play a card that you're somewhat in the in group, and then you have the thing, as is common, for example, in Filipino communities, in which you switch between English and a various language. And I've noticed the very experienced polyglots. When I was an inexperienced polyglot, I was ashamed to use English in situations like that. It was almost like a no English, please. Once you're experienced, you get to know that even native speakers aren't afraid of using English. And so those who are truly bilingual, you want to learn how to behave like them. You want to learn how to talk about their languages the way they do. Does that make sense?
I think I understand what you mean, but so they themselves they mix a lot of English
Yeah,
when living
absolutely,
in.
yeah. But I'm not just talking about, like, for example, in Hungarian, where you can turn anything into a verb, for example. You have words like Pokemon Golni and WoWozni, or like referring to Pokemon Go and World of Warcraft, respectively, and you can turn that into a verb. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actually using English when the two of you both have knowledge of that language. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between a very international community in a big city like New York in the US and what you get in many European
Absolutely.
cities. Because here, the moment people are allowed to speak their language, they'll just, it depends on the person as well, but they'll just, oh, thank God, finally I can speak French. And they'll just like, yeah, yeah,
Indeed.
yeah.
Very
Yeah, I
well.
think this
Yes.
is much more things are changing here as well. Now people are more multilingual, I think.
I get
But
that.
uh
Hmm.
but yeah,
So,
if you speak to them in their language, Italian and Spaniard, German as well, they'll just stick to unless they think you suck at the language, then
yeah, that's
then they'll just switch back. But
indeed. Well, one thing I do as a teacher is I try to tell people tells that even if you suck, there are certain ways to hide it. Like I remember the first time I spoke Finnish to a Finnair stewardess, I pretended that I had a stutter. It worked.
okay, I didn't know that one.
Yeah. Not always recommended, but the thing
So you
is,
teach
I'm here to
languages as
share
well.
stories. What?
You teach languages as well then?
That is correct. Yeah. So,
Ah, okay.
yeah. So I do work mostly with Yiddish, English, and the Scandinavian trio. The thing is, above all, the biggest challenge for a language teacher is knowing when to correct your student and when not to do it. Because above all, if you don't correct very often, then ultimately they don't make progress. But if you correct absolutely everything, then there are also issues as well, and I'm talking about free conversations.
Yeah, if you constantly interrupt them to correct them, then they end up having confidence issues or not speaking as much.
Very true. Yeah,
While if you never correct them, then they end up getting this fossilized mistakes.
very well.
Yeah.
So I heard like practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. But
Oh, that's a good one. I never heard that before.
thank you. Yeah. Very well. Also, like Niels Bohr, the Danish scientist, he said that an expert is someone who has done every possible mistake within a very narrow field. So I think
Mm,
the issue, go out there and make some more mistakes. That's my advice.
yeah, but you do need feedback though.
Oh,
I think
absolutely. Yeah.
what I find here is that, and that's my own experience, and a lot of people here as well. They tend to, when we're learning English in school, they barely corrected us unless the mistakes were really something that you couldn't ignore. They
As
just like,
egregious as I guess
yeah.
you
So
think.
then, especially for pronunciation, more than grammar.
Hmm.
Grammar, not so much, but for pronunciation, they wouldn't uh, correct at all.
Yeah.
Probably because their own pronunciation wasn't very good. But then what you get is that still, I'm still trying to uh, fix decades of things that I learned badly decades ago, and I'm still now they're there and fossilized, and I'm still troubleshooting my English, and that I think that happens a lot.
It
If there's
does, but
no
I do want
feedback.
to let people know that you can, in fact, unkink your brain in that respect. Yeah.
So, in which order did you learn them? Obviously, you speak Yiddish at home, I guess.
Well, I live by myself, so that's
No,
one of the
but when growing
probably.
up, I mean, you.
Actually, I did not. So, my parents are English speakers, even though they did use Hebrew for prayers, and my dad had some working knowledge of Latin, and my mom did have like some knowledge of Swedish from home. Thing is, I picked up. So then there were the kid languages, of which I learned French from Muzzy, and then I forgot it mostly until around 2022, in which I needed to learn it again for Cavarini Uvira, and which is my game set in the DR Congo, which you can
Hmm.
buy on iOS and itch and all that fun stuff. But on top of that, I did learn the Hebrew alphabet when I was 5. And in that respect, it was less conversational rather than focusing on the prayers. So, concerning my timeline, the first language I really learned in depth, well, aside from high school Spanish, which I can go into details as to exactly why America's Spanish speaking, Spanish classes have a lot of issues. I think it really has to do with the test industry primarily. And I know that this is very much not a unique American thing, but Yiddish, I probably acquired the B level when I was around 20, and then Swedish and Norwegian a little bit later on down the line when I was like around 24. And also, yet again, sometimes there's a bit of a revolving door. I did learn some languages like Dutch and Greek, Mikhail, but in t November 1st, 2015, something terrible happened, and I got Lyme disease from a tick in a
Oh.
forest in Connecticut. And I was confined to the couch for a month, in which the only thing I had the energy to do was play New Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo DS. Great game, by the way. Unfortunately, now I associate it with Lyme disease and nothing else. So. As a result, I did have a bit of a Thanos snap concerning my languages, and I forgot Dutch, I forgot Greek, I forgot Italian, and then some. But yeah, I would say, what did you say?
You forgot them.
Yeah, like I still have some passive knowledge of it, but mostly as a result, filtered through various other languages that I know.
How do you when do you realize you've forgotten?
Well, when did I realize it was just, ooh, very good question. It actually had to do with the fact that I had very little energy to do things, and I just didn't practice. And
And
then this is
it
what did you say?
and it was just gone?
Yeah, yeah. The thing is that you can kill your plants if you don't water them. Just give them absolutely no water. And this is one thing I've noticed, for example, with I would say the 10 most commonly known languages globally, well, I would say also including India as well, is that if you live in a global area, the chances of you forgetting them are far less just simply because you're exposed to them more. Try to forget all your Spanish in a place like New York City or anywhere in Texas or New Mexico. Yeah,
No.
not
But
not 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 as easy as you would thought.
and it
But what
didn't it come back? Or you try
I
listening
did,
to it and it just
well, then I had to focus ultimately on building the company a bit more, but also shortly in 2016, Mikkel, I made another deadly mistake.
right.
I monetized my languages. And you know what happens when you monetize your languages? What happens is the one that will give you the most money, you will put all of your study chips on them, which means that you becoming a polyglot suddenly becomes a lot harder. And the reason why is because you need to keep your best languages at a very, very high level.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm using more and more languages for work these days, and you're absolutely right.
Indeed, yes.
I've less time for, unfortunately, to experiment and to learn languages from scratch that I'd be
Aye,
interested in
aye,
because I need to be better at
aye.
languages that I need for specific purposes.
Absolutely.
So where can this has been really interesting. So
Thank you.
where can people find you and find your
Oh, very
games?
good question. So I have a blog that I haven't updated in around a decade called World with Little Worlds at WordPress.com. I also do have a Substack that I need to update called C2 Quest Guide, and I also have an Instagram page where I show up not only my video game things, but also some multilingual memes with translations, including those that are quite difficult to translate. And Herra, Herra dot Kaverini, Kaverini, which in Finnish means Mr. My Pals. And yeah, my video game series is called Kaverini, which in Finnish means like my buddy or my buddies, indicating you becoming friends to other people, you meeting other people throughout your travels. So that's one way. And on Facebook, I'm Zorg sich nicht, which again is another Yiddish expression that doesn't have occur in German. And that's Zorgzikhnit. I'm going to write all these to you down. Okay.
I think you can send me a link. You can send me a list of links later, and I'll just
Okay, I'll do the World with Little
yeah.
Worlds. Okay. Okay, okay. Very well. You're welcome to go ahead and ask me more questions. I'm curious what the fan club has to say.
No, I think the problem is we're running out of time,
Oh,
unfortunately.
that's quite
So
all right. Very well.
yeah, but I think I'll have you back again in a few weeks
Oh, indeed.
if
And
you
I'm
don't mind.
actually ready to do the entire 12 languages thing and do that because I don't
We'll
think
do
I've
it
done
at
that
some.
since
I mean,
December 22nd,
I don't.
December 2019. What?
I think the problem is I don't speak most of the languages you speak.
Uh-huh.
So, but yeah, we could eventually we could do like just have a conversation in as
Very
many
well.
languages as possible. That'll be
Oh,
interesting.
totally. Very well. Or should I say, Samos Reime? Yeah.
All right. All right, man.
Very
Thanks for the call.
Okay, fine. Very well.
Super interesting. Nice to meet you.
Bye bye. Good to meet you
Take
too,
care.
Mikael. Bye bye.